Anytime. Anytime. No more there. Hey everybody, it's me. He'll be back.
Hey everybody! I was posting to my page.
Links. Got to get the
Yes, like
links. Do
we
the
got to figure
links,
out
or you're
how to get
fired.
these links to other sites automatically. There's got to be a way to do it. There's got to be a way.
I'm sure there's like an RSS or something we can do that we can set up. I just don't know that kind of stuff myself.
I don't even
Like
know what RSS means. So
it's what, like, when we were using Spreaker, since I'm
yes.
familiar with that again, it's what they use to send your podcasts to everywhere automatically.
So we need to do that with our YouTube channel. I don't. You know what? I think I looked into this, and I wasn't sure if it was possible with YouTube. I think it is with Anchor. So we're going to be on Anchor as an audio only. So.
Yeah, there's ways to figure it out. I
Speaking of new
don't sound knowledgeable
podcasts,
about it.
why don't you plug what you got, what you're doing with your life now?
That's right. That's right. We are continuing to expand the Uncanny Media Network. I know you guys are kind of like, oh, you always say you got new stuff, but where's the new stuff, guys? Well, if you haven't been paying attention, we got all kinds of new stuff. Um,
We sure do.
we had the Twitch stuff that's still ongoing. We've got
Still
the
going.
Spider Does Things YouTube channel that's still ongoing. We've got something that you like 2 or 3 projects you've got in the works that are going to be ready when you get the minutes.
Minutes.
And
Minutes.
just as of this past Wednesday, mostly symbolic because we always do things on Wednesdays, but I restarted my old podcast, which used to be like a music centric thing, and now it's for everything. It's going to be on Mondays via Spreaker for live stuff, but also on iTunes, Apple, Deezer, Amazon, all that good stuff. It's already been accepted to all those things. I've got 1 episode up so far about sequels because it's a sequel to my old stuff.
Yeah.
Just to give you guys a heads up, my first guest will be there on Monday. It's going to be my own daughter. And she's going to talk about unicorns.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I bet I will put a $5 bill down that's saying that it doesn't. The whole show is not that about that, and she's gonna go into different topics.
She might, but she knows a lot about unicorns, and unicorns
she?
excite her. So she's.
I mean, that's good.
But that's her topic. She's going to sit here with me, and she's going to do a show about unicorns. So I hope you guys are excited for that because that's going to be totally different.
Is that an audio only?
Yeah, those are going to be.
Same.
I do want to get her and I want to get the kids on the show here at some point, just to have them be like, "Hey guys," and whatever. But
right, and they can bring like their favorite toys, and they can show off their favorite toys.
Yeah, so that's in the works too. But for the meantime, podcast on Monday will be my first guest, Annabelle. Topic will be unicorns.
You guys better check that out, or else don't. I can't make a joke that isn't kind of like borderline tasteless, so I gotta.
Yeah, I gotta be. I'm trying to make this podcast, believe it or not, I'm trying to make it inviting. I guess I don't know what the term is. I like inclusive. Maybe
no, don't do that.
Maybe not that. Like that's a little bit much. Maybe just
family friendly.
Yeah, basically, I'm not going to be like, well, so that way you and your children, that's way you and your children can listen to it and hear my daughter talk about unicorns.
That was the Fist Gets Pissed or whatever that song was.
Yeah, unless she starts going off on these unicorns, these
mother flipping unicorns on these mother bleeping plane, mother bleeper.
I mean, I doubt that's going to happen, but
I hope not.
Kids will say whatever.
Yeah, but that's not something kids should be saying.
No, no.
Like maybe not be a bad father.
Maybe watch my language at home.
Oh yeah, I don't. But you probably do though.
I try my best. I try.
Yeah. If he says I try my best, that usually 9 times out of 10 means he's not trying his best.
I try.
Do you though?
I do. I do try.
Like percentage wise, what is the percentage that you try?
Well, if you had a jar, you would not have a small fortune. It's not that it's like it wouldn't be that bad. Like you might be able to buy like a sandwich every so often.
You could buy a Sammy. Hold on.
But sandwiches are expensive because of inflation. So he's gonna fix his light show, of course.
I paid for glare. I'm gonna use the lights.
The glare, because they're all white lights. The glare.
It's a little bright, but that's all right. I can turn that down.
It's just the halo. Oh,
It's because I'm such a good-natured guy. I'm not. I'm a terrible person. And
that's the show. See you guys later.
there it is. Bye. Oh man, why am I coughing? I don't know. Oh, so did you ever get that that dad jokes thing working?
Yeah.
All
More
right,
more or less. We still gotta we'll just hang out here in the background while that video plays. if you want to do that.
Dang, son. Yeah, go ahead and play that. Hook it up. I'm gonna tell one.
There goes. It's time for dad jokes.
I like the grill.
See, it's daddish.
It is. It is. So, I gotta admit, a trigger of mine, and it's not something I'm happy to admit, but one of my triggers is earthquakes. Whenever it happens, I start shaking uncontrollably.
Shiver me triggers.
Look like the brain just. You look like you had a little stroke.
I'm disappointed in a way that I really can't fathom. Like, I'm visibly sad.
You're visibly shaken.
Yeah.
To
I
your
wash
core.
the taste out of my mouth for that.
To your core. To your core, your magma core. Hopefully there's not a shift in your mood. A tectonic shift.
He'll just keep on going.
You just need some good plating.
I get it. It ain't making me laugh, but I get it.
Yeah, everybody likes it. It's a magnanimous decision.
No, I can't give you that one.
You don't have to. I take it.
No, you do.
I'm a take it, boy.
There's nothing to that one. That one's don't work.
You look like a.
It's like that asparagus one. It doesn't work.
Asparagus.
It doesn't because that's not even how you say asparagus. You have to twist the word and break it to make it work. So it doesn't work.
Asparagus. Asparagus.
It doesn't.
Asparagus. Yeah, it works. If it's in an accent, it works. Asparagus. Asparagus.
No.
Yes, it works.
No.
He's grumpy.
That's a failure. That's a failure.
Remember that he's the grumpiest man alive.
That's a failure. But at least I figured out how to add my title. Co-host.
Yeah, like you can do that now.
Yeah.
You can go to your settings.
You can go to brand.
You can go to your settings too, I think. Can't you do it in your settings? I think so, right?
Nope. It's new. It's in brand. You go to brand. You go to where it does display names and show headlines, and you click show headlines, and then you choose your headlines. So
yeah, because we can turn the logo if we want to. See?
Yeah.
We can have that duck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can. So now we're gonna stay here for like 10 minutes when you choose your headline. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I think we should add a background.
Yeah, we need one. I just haven't had the chance to.
Wait, can you do this? Wait. Yeah. I wonder how long that plays for. Well, it loops, so I guess it loops indefinitely.
I don't see what you're doing, so.
You don't hear it?
Oh, do you got background music on?
Yeah.
I don't hear it on my end.
That's
crazy. I see that you clicked it.
But... yeah, because I have it on my end. That's crazy. Show display. See, now I took the display names off. It won't let me add a display name. That's weird.
Oh, well.
She had to be cool.
Yeah, I guess I could have made myself the host then.
The
power grab.
The uncanny power grab, even there's nothing to grab. I knew
taking over the show because you were going to take over the show, and I don't like you taking over my show.
Well, I started it.
You can't take over my show. Logic out the window.
I mean,
We don't play with logic here, you know.
Listen. With that, the lights are on, but nobody's home. Like literally, the lights are on. There's something there, but it's long since died. Much like the people that experience cataclysms. You liked that, didn't you? That was a good one.
You segued on that just like one of those little scooters.
My life is a dumpster fire. It's all good though. Anyways, so I was busy today. I was doing things as I am akin to do, mind you. But I got to figure out why my camera keeps auto-focusing on me.
Is it doing what mine was doing?
It's like it will autofocus. Like if I move, right? See,
It has something to do with the focal point. Like I had to keep moving my mic back because it kept trying to focus on my mic as being the most focal object.
I have like a Razer camera, so I probably have to download the program and calibrate it. So I'll do that next episode. But I was reading today, and I remember like 2 days ago, I was watching some YouTube shorts, which YouTube shorts are like TikTok videos, but they're of YouTube videos,
Facebook Reels, and etc.
Yeah, stuff like that. And I got to admit, I'm addicted to the YouTube shorts because sometimes there's really good information and it's quick, it's instantaneous. And we live in a world of instantaneous information gathering. Like you can get information super quick in these days and times, more so than you ever could in the past. But I came on one that said Adam and Eve story, and it was a Joe Rogan podcast bit. Like maybe 5 minutes. And like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, Joe Rogan, but he has some really good guests on that have had some really awesome information. Graham Hancock's been one. Bob Lazar's been another. A lot of people in these fields have been on his show. And yeah, he's a bit much, you know, sometimes he's like, hey, Eddie, put up this fight of a mountain bear versus a jaguar and won't even be about that. But he has good guests and there is some really good conversation, Elon Musk, that sort of thing. But they were talking about this book by a man by the name of Chan Thomas. Now, a lot of people said Chan, he's got to be Chinese or Asian. No, he's actually Chauncey Powers Thomas, but they just called him Chan as like a nickname. So he wrote a book in, I think, 1966. And I'll pull it up here for you guys. I want to start incorporating more of this into our show. I think that it's a good idea to like use that screen capture because I mean we're a video show. We should pull up some cool evidence and stuff like that. You know?
I played around with it in one of mine. Like in the show I did solo, I played around with some pictures and things. You can do video too, but it slows down my stream by a ton, so I can't do it from my side.
Are you running wireless?
On the laptop, yeah, but it's like
that's probably why
it's 7 feet from the router.
I mean, even so, like wireless is still wireless. It's less than a signal. I'm running Ethernet, so I bet. Well, I don't know. Anyways, here's the book. I'm gonna do one of these here so that I can do a dual screen. So as you can see, it's called the Adam and Eve story: the history of cataclysms, uncensored digital version, magnetic pole shift. So, and we can do a quick read. The famous CIA document finally with a revised, readable, and fully digital version. The curious text gained a lot of attention as the 2010s approached their end, and as science finally started to acknowledge the fact that there is a big possibility that the magnetic pole shift can indeed be a cataclysmic event that destroys everything, if this cataclysm might be imminent. A discussion for that for years was shut down by the use of terms conspiracy theory and pseudoscience. Is finally starting to gain the attention it needs, even though it might be too late now. This is only a single part of a vast literature dealing with the subject of magnetic pole shift. I hope this book is read only as the first step on your research on this extremely important topic. Now, obviously, whoever wrote this, right, this here is definitely biased. I mean, obviously, but
it's to prop the book up and get you to buy the book, really.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it's not going to be anything else. It's definitely to buy the book. So um what that is all about. And I read like a little bit of it today, and I had learned a little bit about it just by reading stuff. The crazy thing though, uh people see CIA and they see conspiracy theory. So I watched a YouTube video because I'm knowledgeable and YouTube videos are always accurate. No, I watched this YouTube video where the guy broke it down about the book and the whole conspiracy theory. The guy, Chauncey Power Thomas, worked for like a government firm, like agency. So whatever he wrote was in fact considered property of the government, if you will. So when the caseworker, the case specialist who took on this after he left, they had to classify it as conspiracy theory, or they had to classify it under CIA documents because it's still part of the CIA. So even though it really like, and a lot of that says that the book itself was censored, like you see uncensored here, but the book itself was only like so many, like 50, I think 50 to 60 pages. And the guy broke it down why certain pages were blank because somebody actually bought a copy of the book. So like one page was blank because the other page was the picture of the Earth, the magnetic poles, the core. The other page was just blank. We have this in books all the time of like, you'll have a book and like one page will be like the story, and then the next page will be just blank. I've seen many books like that. A lot of old books have blank pages. A lot of the new ones don't, to save money, obviously. So the idea of the magnetic shifting poles is a actual thing that can happen. But the thing with this book is he starts off talking about what would you do in a case of a cataclysm, a world-ending event that you had to take shelter from, and how would you guard yourself from the heathens that would come to get you. In the beginning of the book, he talks about experiments that they did on mice. And they did a normal density plane and a low density plane. And in the low density, criminality among mice was rampant. Forced rapes, murders, and cannibalism. Like the mice were eating each other, killing each other, forcible sexual acts. And this was all done under science. And then in normal density, it was not. That didn't happen. They ate their regular food, which always like makes me like, why do you got to experiment on mice? Like, what did they do to you? Type thing. But whatever. That's 60s, man. I don't know what you want me to say. Then he goes on to talk about it's going to happen soon. Like a lot of uh, apocalyptic authors, cataclysm specialists, things like that will always point to the inevitable of what are you going to do when this happens, and it's happening soon. I mean, we had that scare in 2012 with the Mayan apocalypse supposed to happen, even though it was more of a changing of uh, the earth. It wasn't or a changing of really the earth and of people's mind frames. It wasn't like a whole societal collapse that everybody predicted. Just like the Y2K scare, where everybody was like, "Oh my God, everything is gonna just explode and stop working," even though it was all fine. So this book doesn't change that. It goes into the what I like to call fear porn right away, and the fear mongering like right off the bat, because that's what's going to catch your attention. It's the what are you going to do to protect your family from rape? And that's basically what it says in the book. There's a part where it talks about protecting your mothers or your wives and your daughters. And so they pull the reader in. Later on, he goes to talk about the magnetic pole shift theory in regards to Adam and Eve and the cataclysm that happened when they got kicked out of the garden. The poles shifted. So obviously the Garden of Eden was destroyed, and they were left to roam the wilderness for so long. And that sort of thing happened. But what I find to be more fascinating about this idea, this concept, is the poles have shifted. Not as crazy as this book talks about, and Spider will tell you more about this because he actually read a thing on something in regards to this recently. But I don't buy into the whole cataclysmic event. They said it could happen, but anything could happen. Things could an asteroid could strike the Earth and boom, we're back in the Ice Age type thing. Um, but the one thing I do find interesting is there's always a cataclysm story in mythology, in Native American literature. All of this has a flood myth and an end of the world myth. There's always both. Of course, we have Ragnarok from Norse mythology, but it's all like a sort of destruction and a rebirth.
Mm-hmm.
Destruction, rebirth. People say, well, what about Revelations? That's also a destruction and rebirth. If you look at it with the scorpions and the things coming out of the earth to get people and demons and everything else. But God comes back, throws the devil down into the pit, does what he needs to do with the Antichrist, and then there's a new Jerusalem. So once again, we have the destruction of man, the beast, the ones who take the mark of the beast, 666 and all that. But then we have God reigning over New Jerusalem, and for 2,000 years, and the devils or the beast is unleashed, and then he finally has a final victory, and then everything is remade. So everything has a rebirth sort of atmosphere to it. But we'll come to that here in a little bit. But Spider, tell us about this article you read, and tell us about the pole shifts.
Now, this is something interesting because the whole pole shift thing, as you said, it was initially like, oh, it's not going to happen, whatever, it's fake. And science has slowly come around over the last couple of decades to be like, well, no, this is something that has happened before, and it can happen again, and it's likely to happen again. And one of the things that happened recently, and I wish I could remember, I hadn't bookmarked the article, and if I'd looked at it within the same span of time as we talked about the topic, I would have been like, oh, boom, I got this, and prepared it for everybody.
Right.
But,
No, you're fine.
so I'm gonna have to try to
just
remember.
pretty much told him today.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to try to remember. But the basics of it were that they have measurements of the general, like you can't measure the Earth's core directly, of course. It's too hot, it's too far down, whatever. But they have basic ways to measure how the planet is moving and how the core is moving to affect the way that the planet is moving. And they've recently stated that they've detected signs that the planet's magma core has started spinning the opposite way, which is very interesting. The reason part of that is important is because the core spins a certain direction, and that helps produce gravity. That's where our gravity comes from. It comes from the spinning of the core along with the density and the mass and everything like that. So spinning the other way, it's not necessarily going to affect the gravity because it's still going to be spinning, but it's going to affect things like the Coriolis effect. It could affect things like the tides, which are coincide between both the movement of the Earth and the movement of the moon. If they're at odds with each other, then you're going to get a lot more push and pull than you did previously, which is another thing that I hadn't considered till right this very second. So there we go. And that's interesting because they didn't make a big deal out of it. They said that it was spinning the opposite way, and the article didn't seem like it was all doom and gloom. It seemed like it was just this little side note, like, oh yeah, here's something interesting for you, the interesting facts. But I feel like it's a big deal. It's just like, and I brought this up on the show before, it's just like when we had those huge earthquakes in the Indian Ocean in the early 2000s, and they caused those big tsunamis that hit, I think, Indonesia and a lot of those other smaller like island nations. But the earthquakes were so powerful that the earth wobbled on its axis. And it's one of those things that you wouldn't necessarily feel it immediately. And they said at the time, they're like, we aren't going to see any immediate effects probably, but we have no idea what the long-term effects could be because that's a pretty significant thing. It affects seasons. It affects, a lot of different parts of what goes into making the weather work and everything like that. And ever since then, you haven't heard anything about it. Like, I don't know if anybody's bothered to follow up or to keep an eye on it or anything. They just said this could potentially happen, and then it was forgotten. So that combined with the magma core spinning the opposite way, I think a lot of these little points are really, really, really important. And I think they have a lot to do with what you were just talking about.
Well, they also go into talking about the idea of, well, not the book, but the guy that was breaking it down. He said, while a lot of the stuff is probably not going to happen, he said the stuff that could happen though, the changing of the earth, which would coincide with changing in the atmosphere, things like that, would cause a lot more of the sun's harmful rays to get through. Cancer
Hmm.
rates would increase. You would have large swaths of power grids just going out, because solar flares are very, very serious. We get them every now and again,
Hmm.
and sometimes you feel them, sometimes you don't. But a powerful one can knock out the energy grids in major cities, and then you're going to have crime rampant.
Hmm. And if the poles did shift, that's going to change the magnetic field. It's not going to
Mhm.
eliminate it, but it's going to be like the magnetic field is going to flip as well. And that's not, as much as it might be easy to think, oh, it's going to be just an instantaneous on off thing. The magnetic field will take some time to move from one to the other.
Yeah.
And that's going to leave the planet exposed to a lot of cosmic things. Like, people don't realize how much cosmic energy is just floating out there. There's a lot of
Yeah.
radiation.
Yes.
There's stuff from the sun, like the solar flares and things. There's so much, and there's solar dust and things that burns up in our atmosphere that's affected by the magnetic field. And that's not even to say anything about the asteroids, meteorites that fly through. So a lot of damage can be done just in the reversal of the poles that have nothing to do with the planet itself, but everything just floating through space that happens to encounter our planet.
Yes, and that's the point. Is it's not the beginning or the end. It's that middle part
Hmm.
where the poles are shifting is where you're going to have the solar flares, you're going to have the atmospheric pressures, you're going to have a lot of things that are going to change in that span of time. That's going to cause a lot of devastation. Now, granted, it's probably not going to cause anything like you would see in the movie 2012 or whatever the movie was with Nicolas Cage, um, where the planet was getting destroyed and they had to send the kids to another planet because they were angels. I don't remember. It was a pretty decent movie though.
Yeah, he's usually in weird movies.
And Day After Tomorrow. So yeah, I don't think you're going to see anything like that. But I think the idea that our energy grids could just be taken out by a solar flare, and nobody ever talks about that. Nobody ever's
Mhm.
like, man, a good EMP or a good solar flare, and it's all going to crap. And I think that instead of spending all this money on asinine things that aren't doing anything, we need to figure out a different way to get our energy so that if that does happen, it's just another day. It's not okay, we just had an EMP blast. A nuclear bomb will do that. It'll send out an EMP
Yeah.
with the blast, knocks out all communications, does all that. I mean, everybody's played Call of Duty. You guys know this how this works. But solar flares. A lot of people don't. That's the one thing nobody's ever worried about. Everybody's worried about everything else on this planet, but nobody's ever like, man, I'm kind of worried about them solar flares, and those are important. Those are things that, like I said, if you knock out the energy grids in major cities, you're gonna, especially like say you knock out energy grids in the middle of a hot summer, right? Temperature increases and decreases of extreme nature cause people to act in extreme ways. Um, Obviously, the cold weather, people are fighting to get inside, right? The heat, people are sweating to death, they're dying. You got to think there's people that would be on like, in these giant apartment complexes. There'd be offices on 50, 60 floors with no air conditioning, no nothing, and they can't just open the windows that high up.
Hmm.
So you're going to have a lot of tensions rising. You're going to have shootings. You're going to have, because there's been historical reports of cities like New York, for instance, blackouts happen. And in the middle of summer, and a lot of times it was an increase in crime. It was increase in deaths because due to heat stroke, things like that. So these solar flares aren't a joke. But,
I mean, nobody's running out to be like, the solar flares, we gotta do something. We gotta make the Earth shield.
And I
Gotta
think
have Earth
part of
shield.
the I think part of the problem too is that solar flares are one of those things that the media makes like this like they makes it is a big deal and it should
Mhm.
be a big deal, but they make it into a oh, it's a huge deal. Oh, the
Right.
solar flares are coming. Ooh, and then they say it in such a
Why,
way that
why does
like
it sound like Paul Bear is doing the news? Oh,
because
the
it's that
solar
dramatic.
flares, Undertaker.
It's that dramatic, and people are
It
like,
is.
"Oh yeah, I'm sure. I bet. Whoop de doo," and they discount it
Right.
on purpose. And then it's because the media makes it more like they make it important in a kind of a silly kind of way, like they do many things. Like most of your mass
Yes.
media, they present, oh, this is the most dangerous thing that's happening right now. This political party is going to destroy the fabric of your whole lives.
Yep.
And this particular one is going to do even worse. And oh my
Yep.
gosh. And it's like, okay, whatever. But I mean, some things latch on with people because they're everyday problems and people freak out about it. But other
Yep.
things, it's like, oh, the sun, it's out in space. I don't got to worry about that. Whatever. And so the more the media makes this huge deal out of it, but presents it less factual, more like, oh, doom and gloom,
Right.
then people take it less seriously, despite the fact that it is far more important than whatever big politics news is happening or whatever this is and whatever that is. So it's a weird kind of paradox thing how the more they make a big deal out of it, the less people believe it's a big deal.
Facts. Facts. So here is what we're talking about tonight: the cataclysms of cataclysms. Here is the Nibiru cataclysm. I don't know if you remember this. I remember this. This was around the time. This was actually I had been 2 years into this. I didn't know you back in 2012. I didn't meet you until like
Mm-hmm.
20. No, I know you back in. Did I think in 2012? I'm trying to remember where I was at. 2012. No, I knew you back in 2012. Yeah, yeah, I knew you back in 2012. Um, but the whole Nibiru cataclysm was crazy. The idea that the Earth was going to end because Nibiru was supposed to come circling back
Mm-hmm.
around. It was supposed to come back on the around again, and this time it was supposed to either A, destroy the Earth, or B, bring about the idea that the aliens were part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy Leader, she was the leader of uh, this whole ideology of the Nibiru coming around again cataclysm. She talks about Hale-Bopp didn't exist; it was a fraud, and it was just a distant star. It's not getting closer. But then she talks about Planet X being, 4 times the size of the Earth, and its closest approach would occur on May 27, 2003, which would result in Earth's rotation ceasing for exactly 5.9 terrestrial days, which would be followed by Earth's pole destabilizing in a pole shift. See, here we go again. Caused by magnetic attraction between Earth's core and the magnetism of the passing planet. This in turn would disrupt Earth's magnetic core and lead to subsequent displacement of Earth's crust. After the 2003 date past that incident, leaders said that it was merely a white lie to fool the establishment. She refused to disclose the true date, saying that to do so would give those in power enough time to declare martial law and trap people in cities during the shift, leading to their deaths. So that's something you're always going to see in these so-called end times talks with a lot of these people, is they will straight up say, uh, it's this date, but when the date doesn't happen, and this has been something that's been happening for a long time. I have a book over here about religious groups, and one of them, which I believe was the Seventh Day Adventist, they actually not Adventist, Adventist,
Adventists. Yep.
Adventist.
Yep.
They talk about having a the origins of that religion was a apocalypse was supposed to occur. God was supposed to come back on this date. When that date didn't happen, it was a right kick in the pants, and they made another date.
They said,
And
"Oh, we misinterpreted the
Yep.
the prophecies, so it's actually this one.
So when that date didn't come, then people were like, okay, you guys don't. This is a bunch of nonsense. So then they switched up their religious beliefs and they made it because there's actually a Seventh-day Adventist church in Akron by right around where I used to stay. Literally like not even a quarter of a mile. Like I could
They're
walk
pretty
there.
popular, believe it or not. Like I mean, I recognize the name pretty common, and they
So do
show
I.
up like they used to do the TV commercials. They used to do the TV commercials along with like the Latter-day Saints and stuff. They used to do a very similar thing. They had a book to offer, and they had different things, and it was pretty regular for a long time. You don't see that kind of stuff so much on TV anymore because you don't see much religious commercial on TV. I think they passed a law or something along with like I don't know when they passed the law banning most cigarette commercials and alcohol commercials and whatever. They banned something with religious commercials because you don't see much as far as regular milder churches either. But yeah, they used to be big, like all the time. You'd see them paid for by the Seventh Day Adventists, and it was some big dramatic thing.
See, I don't remember seeing those. Maybe wherever you were at, you saw them, but I never saw them. I would see like Robert Schuller's Crystal Cathedral. I don't know if you know what that is, but like that was a real big one. But that was just for service. Like they were like Sunday at 5:00. See Robert Schuller in the Crystal Cathedral. Like Billy Graham was another one. But for the most part, I didn't see a lot of religious TV commercials. I only saw like advertisements to go to the church because they would have like TV sermons where they would show it like on a TV channel, and they'd be like Sunday morning at 10. Robert Schuller from the Crystal Cathedral. It was a big thing. It's not. I think he's dead, and I don't think the Crystal Cathedral is even around anymore. But, anyways, so although she originally refers as Planet X, it ended up becoming deeply associated with Nibiru. And any of you that have read Sitchin and his theses on Sumer and the Anunnaki and that whole concept of the Anunnaki creating mankind to do work, mankind rebels and sort of kicks them to the curb, if you will. And he was a proponent of that. And, the 12th Planet, fantastic book. A lot of people said he got the translations wrong, but it's a language and a series of images that nobody really 100% knew what it came from. And he was just going off what he thought based off of the information that he pulled from a lot of the stuff that he found. So I'm not one of these people that's like, Sitchin didn't know what he was talking about. I'm like, okay, maybe there were some things that were, mistranslated. That happens. I mean, it's going to happen. But I still think that there's a lot of the books that he talks about, a lot of stuff in his books he talks about that is still fascinating and still could be used in a way that is educational. And like we said, the 12th Planet here, it says, according to Sitchin's interpretation of ancient Mesopotamian religious texts, which has been shown to be based on a faulty understanding of Sumerian texts, of course they're going to say faulty, a giant planet called Nibiru Marduk passes by Earth every 3,600 years, allowing its sentient inhabitants to interact with humanity. Sitchin identified these beings with the Anunnaki in Sumerian mythology and claimed that they were humanity's first gods. Leader first made the connection between Nibiru and her Planet X on her site in 1966. Planet X does exist, and it is the 12th planet, one and the same. Sitchin, who died in 2010, denied any connection between his work, and Leader's claims. In 2007, partly in response to Leader's proclamations, Sitchin published a book, The End of Days, which set the time for the last passing of Nibiru by Earth at 556 BC, which would mean, given the object's supposed 3,600-year orbit, that it would return sometime around 2900 AD. He did say that he believed the Anunnaki might return earlier by spaceship, and that the timing of their return would coincide with the shift from the astrological age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, which we are currently in, sometime between 2090 and 2370. Now,
We are in the age of Aquarius now, if I am not mistaken. I'm not really familiar with how the ages work. But we can talk about that on one of the future episodes.
Mhm.
But modern proponents of the Nibiru cataclysm often cite the winged sun symbol as actually representing Nibiru, whom they believe would appear like a winged star. So, oddly enough, here we have uh, this gentleman Sitchin, who I still think, say what you want about his mistranslations, but I didn't see anybody else running out to do the work that he was doing at the time.
Mhm.
I didn't see anybody, people that said, "Oh, well, he didn't get it right." They didn't publish anything to refute what he claimed. They just said, "Oh, he's wrong," and they would give maybe like a 5 sentence, maybe a paragraph, 2 paragraph, like, "Okay, well, this is what this symbol means, so it can't mean this." But I didn't see these people putting in the same amount of work he did. And if he did get some stuff wrong, hey, that happens. That's ancient history. Nobody alive today remembers that time. There's not like, a couple 1,000-year-old grandpa like, I remember Sumer. Those were the good days. Kids were behaved back then. You didn't have the kids with their music and the headphones and the video games. Back then, you know what you played with? You played with mud that was used to make the bricks for the buildings, because that's all we had was mud and bricks. We just had mud and bricks. There was nothing else.
My family could afford a Baghdad battery.
Your family was po.
Oh my gosh.
We could afford the Atlantean cruise.
We had an anti-catheric mechanism.
Anticatheric? No way. We had one of those too. My daddy had one in his ship. We
Oh
would
my
go. We would
gosh.
stop at Atlantis and Lemuria and Mew.
That's the ship that sunk. You ain't got nothing.
Hey, you shut up. That's because you tried to sink it. I know what you was doing. You was engaged in piracy. You probably the one that burned down the Library of Alexandria. You're a crook.
Oh my gosh. Don't tell nobody.
I tell them.
What's interesting is, despite the fact that a lot has been said about the so-called Nibiru, oh yeah, it's not real, blah blah, this and that. Every day there's more actual evidence that there is something out there in the solar system that's
Mhm.
another object that is large enough to have an orbit like the rest of the planets. Now, whether it's an entire planet or whether it's something smaller than Pluto or whatever, still don't know. But
What?
there's a lot of gravitational evidence that there is something there, and we're finding out more and more all the time.
Well, remember that Uranus was actually part of another planet, and it collided and broke off. And that other thing, whatever it was, is just out there floating around. And I think that it's highly possible that it could be a Nibiru or a Planet X, because the way that they have described it is that, yeah, something did smack into the side of Uranus so many, millions of years ago, billions of years ago, and boom, there's a chunk of something floating around out in the galaxy. Like we.
That's the theory about the moon too. Like, there's been some
Yeah.
pretty valid
Yeah.
theories, not 100%. Like, they're still kind of like, well, I don't know, but they're some pretty good, compelling evidence that the reason our moon exists is because something smashed into the planet Earth in the far distant past and dislodged enough material to create another small planetoid that slowly coalesced into the moon.
Mhm.
So it's not a far-fetched theory. Now, whether there is an alien civilization there, who knows? Probably not in our lifetime. We'll probably never find that out. But it's still compelling that there is something that could cause a major disaster
Yeah.
just kind of lurking on an extra wide orbit. And when it comes around, we're not going to be prepared for it.
No, and I don't like I said, I don't see that happening in our lifetime, mind you. But if we look at these cataclysms, because there are some very interesting ancient cataclysms that are said to happen, like from the Hopi Indians. We'll get to that in a second. But what we're seeing is that all these things in the past that they said, oh, we just discovered this today, but they have things like like civilizations or peoples like the Dogon who basically described Sirius B, something we didn't know about until the 70s and 80s. So I think there's more to these things than meets the eye. I don't think it's just some guy that doesn't know what he's talking about. I think there's people that know what they're talking about, or if they don't fully understand it, they get the basic gist of it. Like you said, the moon. It's a satellite of the Earth. Supposedly, the moon was actually part of the Earth, and it broke off due to something hitting us, which could have been, oddly enough, maybe the Ice Age, one of the Ice Ages. With everything smacking into it. And I also thought this was kind of interesting. I was watching today. I think it was part of the Joe Rogan show. They were talking about the flood myths, and we had a whole show on the flood myth. You guys can check that out. I think that one might not be up on Anchor yet, but it will be there. But it goes on to talk about how the idea that this happened, I just completely drew a blank on what I was talking about. I'm not even going to front to you guys out there.
You saw something on Possible Rogan about flood myths.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I don't know what happened. My brain just stopped. My brain had a pole shift.
Your core just
it stopped. My brain just stopped and everything kept going. Everything kept going. They talk about the flood myths happening, and they talk about there's a place in the Sahara that is concentric circles. You can see it from satellite, but it's concentric rings. And for those of you who don't know about the Sahara, there's also been glass, a whole sea of glass found in the Sahara that they said was part of a nuclear explosion. They go on to talk about Antarctica being part of that at one point, but these concentric rings were thought to be Atlantis, and a flood would be able to destroy a city, and supposedly it was destroyed. It was an advanced race. There's a cataclysmic event that happens. Whether that cataclysmic event was based on crystals, a lot of people say that it was like a lot of your New Age folks said that it was because of crystals. They somehow mismanaged them, or they got broken, or it was something that was powering their civilization. The crystals went haywire. The flooding happened. It ends up flooding the place, and then sand and things like that. There's a whole process. But then you have what happens in some cases that we have seen is when places flood, it can sometimes turn the water to stone, petrifies it. If you guys have ever been, I go to West Virginia frequently, and I found fossils there, fossils of leaves of wood in the stone. Like you can literally see the image of the leaf in the stone. So what's to say that the flood didn't happen in the Sahara, right? Because if the pole shift happened, even if it's a little bit, continent shift. So you have these big continents shifting, and a continent shift would make parts of Antarctica a tundra, but there's still parts of Antarctica today that aren't as icy as other parts. And the Perry Reese map, part of it shows Antarctica, but it shows animals, it shows flora and fauna that don't even exist today. Today it doesn't exist. And you go to think, you're like, well, what could have happened? Flood. All of these different religious groups, the Native Americans, South Americans, Mayans, Incans, all of these groups, even ancient China has flood myths. They all have these crazy flood myths that the whole earth gets flooded, and they're the only survivors. If we look in Genesis, boom, only survivors. Noah, his wife, his sons, their wives, that's it. But if we sit back and look and say, okay, if we read the Bible, we see that God is not a fan of incest. So what I'm thinking is they weren't the only ones to survive. There was others that survived as well. We have multiple flood myths. One or two, even like let's say even like 20 flood myths. I could be like, okay, maybe something's not right. Maybe you're just lying, right? Because they're flood myths. They can happen. But when you have hundreds of these groups that say, yeah, there was a flood, our people experience it. Native Americans, South Americans, Europeans, Asians, Middle Eastern, Arabs, Jews, all of it. Everybody has a flood myth. And we've all seen what floods can do to a civilization. Let's take, for instance, 2011 with the tsunami that hit Japan. A lot of that place was underwater. And like my co-host said, when he talked about the earthquakes in the Indian Ocean, these are events that happen, and then tsunamis happen, floods happen. We have whole civilizations underwater. We have a place off of Japan that has a pyramid, like a crystal pyramid right underneath it. We have all of these places that have these buildings that are in the sea. And what other cataclysm could have happened but a flooding? So
Makes you think.
Makes you think. So getting back into this here, we have I'm going to give you guys one more here because we're running out of time. This cataclysm stuff is fascinating. Yeah, I could do like another 4 shows on just this alone. So here we have the blue star Kachina. And in Frank Waters' writings on Hopi mythology, the blue star Kachina, or the Sakuwashahoa, is a spirit that will signify the coming of the beginning of the new world by appearing in the form of a blue star. The blue star Kachina is said to be the 9th and final sign before the day of purification, described as an apocalypse or a world-engulfing cataclysm that will lead to the destruction of the world. Now, author Jason Colavito investigated this prophecy and found no reference to it before the late 20th century. For those of you that aren't really familiar, though, with Jason Colavito, there are different books attributed to him, different research projects attributed to him from the Middle East. We have things like Iram of the Pillars that he discusses. So I knew the name as soon as I saw it. I'm like, oh, okay. So according to the Hopi legend, as reported by Frank Waters, Taioa, the creator, created his nephew Sutun Kanang to construct places for life. Out of the nothingness, Sutun Kanang created 9 universes or worlds. Once again, we have that. We have the idea of universes and worlds, multiple ones, in like the Jewish Kabbalah, Buddhism has different universes that people ascend to or descend depending on how your karma is when it's redistributed to you. But the first of these 3 worlds were Tokpela, Tokpa, and Kuskurza, and they were already inhabited and subsequently destroyed due to corruption and the wickedness of man. Reminds me of the Quran and the tale of Allah and the jinn. Allah actually created the jinn first and put them on the earth. Well, when he created man, he saw that the jinn and man weren't going to get along, so he shifted the dimensions and put the jinn in another dimension, while meanwhile mankind was left to get the planet. So that's an interesting aspect that it gets that's destroyed due to the corruption and wickedness of man. In this, it's the jinn, and it just gets dimensionally phased. Each time one of the worlds is destroyed, the faithful Hopi are taken underground and saved from destruction to later emerge and populate the next world. According to Waters' books, which were written in the 1960s, Hopis believe that humanity is currently residing in the 4th world, Tuwa Kawachi. Like the previous worlds, Tuwa Kawachi is also prophesied to be destroyed because of the corruption of humanity. And then, here's the final sign. But the idea or the notion that there is these cataclysmic events that happen isn't just something that we see in Norse mythology. It's not just something we see in the Christian Bible or the Islamic Quran. We're seeing it right here with the Hopi mythology. Like I said, there is Covalito says that there's no evidence that he found anything else past this point. But even if he didn't, we could talk about other belief systems that do talk about this sort of great ending. Zoroastrianism talks about it, Islam, Christianity, Native American beliefs. All of these center around these crazy cataclysms that are supposed to take everybody out. I have yet to actually see a belief system not talk about a cataclysm. Just be like, you know what happens? People hang out, they have fun, and the world ends. So, I don't know. What do you think? What are some final thoughts from Spider?
I think that part of it is people throughout the ages seeing changes in their world, and the changes are so dramatic that you can't help but feel like it affects the entire world. But I think other things are significant events that we're kind of taking for granted. We have a tendency to kind of say, "Oh yeah, well, in Egypt, if they talk about flooding, that's because they have yearly flooding of the Nile and things like that and whatnot. And it's just ancestral stories, and now we know better." But if it was just in Egypt, okay, but we know that it's happened in many other places, and we know that there are places that people have resided on at ridiculous heights, like places miles and miles above sea level that would be nearly uninhabitable, but they've made efforts to do farming terraces and do this and do this, but then they abandon these places. And we talked about that a few shows ago. How they'll go up and then they'll come back down and leave these places alone. It's because they went there as a survival tactic, because something happened that kept them out of the lowlands.
Yeah.
What else could it be other than a flood? I mean, I can't imagine some other disaster that would cut off all of the land below a certain height and keep you from accessing it. And so once the waters recede, everybody comes down. And maybe they didn't keep records all the time because people didn't write things down all the time. And when they did, maybe they wrote an allegory. Maybe they wrote based on their own understanding. We just don't understand how they saw the world. And we assume it was just, oh, well, when they talk about the gods battling, it was just, oh, it's a lightning storm. Right. Okay. Well, but maybe it was something else.
Yeah.
Maybe it was something more. And we just don't know. And it's my hope one of these days that we'll find some significant evidence that helps us understand, because if we don't understand, I think something similar is going to happen to our civilizations. We're going to think that we're so smart and we're so much better and so much more advanced, and yet we still keep building our cities in floodplains. We still get hurricanes in New Orleans that wipe out entire parts of the city. We still lose entire areas of Florida all the time here in the United States. We still lose all these places and all these lives because we don't believe. We don't believe it's going to happen.
Well, we like to think that we're bigger than God. And I mean that in a literal sense. A lot of people, mankind likes to think it is indestructible until it realizes that it is not indestructible and that it is in fact very destructible. And mankind never heeds the warning signs of civilizations before it that were destroyed by these same cataclysms that we're seeing. And the interesting thing here is that when you really think about it, and I get why mankind gets like this, if you're like a generation removed from an apocalypse, you're still there to remember, okay, I remember when this actually happened. But the farther out you get from that event, the less likely people are going to believe it. They're going to say, oh, well, yeah, my grandfather, he's just talking out as what. He didn't see it. My dad didn't see it. I didn't see it. You're so far removed from the event that in your opinion, it didn't exist, because if you didn't see it, it couldn't exist. So there it is. Anyways, guys, it's been a pleasure. I'm glad you all tuned in to This Uncanny Earth, available on YouTube, Facebook. I'm going to be uploading more episodes to Anchor. Those will be the audio only, so make sure you got your ears ready for the audio onlys, because I want to make sure our audio stuff is still out there for mental consumption. So making sure you're checking out our Twitches. You can check me out at This Uncanny Gaming, and yours is what?
DMGRGN.
Damage Gregory Knox. That's what it was. You can check that out. You can check this out. Check out the Monday show. What are we naming that?
It's called Let's Talk About This, because I thought that was a nice little throwback and a little bit of like, nah, but also it's something new. So
lights are on, but nobody's home.
Yeah, I thought it was appropriate.
I do too, and I like it, and I like what you're doing with it. So make sure you guys check that out Monday. Annabelle Houston will be on and talking about her love of unicorns.
Oh, yeah.
So make sure you guys do not miss that. Of course, we'll be back streaming. Don't forget to check out the Uncanny Spirits Club, where Spider goes and searches high and low in the floodplains, above the floodplains, all over the plains, in search for good liquors, beers, and other alcoholic beverages, and maybe sometime in the future, maybe non-alcoholic beverages. Just because it's
I may get one of those Guinness Zeros that are the NA Guinnesses, and
don't do that to yourself.
I don't really want to, but I might do it for the show. It'll only be for the show, just to taste test it. But I'm kind of dreading it because I don't. You can make your joke now if you want.
Nah,
the old classic,
the old Sharps and O'Douls that you used to love to drink back in the day. There was a Guinness at the grocery store that I saw. The coffee one. They have the nitro brew,
which
coffee.
Is not bad.
So
it's not bad.
$8 for 4 though.
Yeah.
So
expensive.
A little pricey for 4 beers. So make sure you're checking out the Uncanny Spirits Club. Make sure you're checking out Let's Talk About This. Not about the music. Don't check that out. That's been rebranded into the dumps. So don't check that out. Also, make sure you're checking out both of our Twitch channels, DMGRN, right?
RGN. There's
RGN,
2 G's.
DMGRGN.
That's right.
2 G's for Gregory. I don't know what that's about. Whatever. It's not my business. It's your business. DMGRGN. Make sure you're checking out that Twitch channel and This Uncanny Gaming, where you're going to get me playing some games, as we have both been playing Dead Space.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Make sure you guys are checking that out, because we're playing it. He's playing in the evening, and I'm playing it in the morning, because freedom. Also, check out This Uncanny Earth. We have a backlog that you guys can check out. We also have the Facebook group. We're going to have a website. We're going to have a website. Once we have a website, we're going to start doing, what I would like to do is I would like to start doing articles that we both can write, and sort of advancing the show, and also pointing out some very interesting things. We might get some guest authors. I have a couple people in mind, so you might see some of that. Also, do not forget, the videos will be up soon. The Uncanny Trips Expeditions, still there. Everything is still where it needs to be. We just got to put it where it needs to go. We got that coming up.
Monolithic machine. We're all we're moving forward step by step here,
and it's just us. So there's not anybody else. We don't have an editor. We don't have a key grip. We don't have a fluffer.
Producer.
We don't have any of those things. We don't have a producer. We don't have any of these people. So we can't talk about that kind of music, because we don't have that kind of people, because it's not for truckers. So we can't do that. Truckers in Canada, mind you. So, whatever. But we will be bringing those things to you. And also, you might see one of us on any number of cross episodes that we do. Mm-hmm. So you might see our kids. I know you have seen my son come in here, watch me play different games. Also, you have seen him stream with me playing Street Fighter and getting destroyed, because I have a lineage.
Because Street Fighter for you is no mercy, regardless of who it is.
Doesn't matter who it is. I don't care if it's my son or if it's you or
That's
if it's
why I
anybody
don't
else,
play that game with him.
you will not. Nobody will. Nobody except Lawrence. Lawrence is the only person who will play that game. I mean, nobody else will. Everybody else is like, I don't want to because you're too good. And I'm like, whatever. Just play the game. Just take your losses. Take your losses. I need somebody to beat up
I've
on.
taken enough of my losses. I do not want to take any more.
So make sure you guys are checking out all of the available Uncanny media. We're going to be doing some other cool stuff revolving the brand. I'm going to talk to my co-host about. So yeah, guys, check it out. Keep tuning in. If you have friends that like this kind of stuff, tune them in. Turn them on to our show because it's a great show. So yeah, that's it. Anyways, guys, as always, I have been your host, Robert Solomon, and my co-host Spider. He's over this way because he's here. And yeah, see, we're good to go now. Wouldn't they go this way? I don't know anymore. What we're doing. What are we doing? What are we doing? So make sure you're checking out our shows. Make sure you check out the platforms. Please comment, like, share, subscribe on our YouTube channel. We're going to be putting more stuff there. As always, this has been a blessing. This has been great. And you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. So, as we famously love to say, why be boring when you can be uncanny? We will see you folks next week.